am Josephine Burton. I am Artistic Director of Dash Arts, and I am thrilled to be with Ruth Livesey in the beautiful surroundings of the Royal Holloway University to talk about the Great Middlemarch Mystery.
The Great Middlemarch Mystery was an immersive, multi-site reimagining of George Eliot's great novel Middlemarch, which we set across 5 locations around Coventry Cathedral during City of Culture. The collaboration with Josephine started back in 2019 when I was working on a quite traditional project about George Eliot, the writer, and her amazing novel Middlemarch, which I've loved almost all my life, as long as I can remember. I happened to be introduced to Josephine by a mutual acquaintance, and Josephine was also thinking about George Eliot and about Coventry, the city where George Eliot lived for a long time. I just said, I can't believe that no one's tried to think of Middlemarch in the way I think of it, which is a kind of immersive experience, that we're so inside the novel is so rich and so dense. And as an author, Eliot tries repeatedly to draw you into the action and make you part of it, to feel complicit in it.
So we set out trying to understand how we could lift this amazing novel and lift it off the page and turn it into a piece of theatre. So we set off on our journey into Middlemarch as the pandemic hit. We spent quite a lot of early lockdown batting ideas together, pulling together sheets of character profiles and who we might be interested in focusing on. And emerged from that process just realising that we're going to need to write a script. So we started then, Ruth and I, again over lockdown, to work out how we might be able to turn George Eliot's novel into a script.
One of the fascinating things to me about the 19th century novel and why I love it so much and why the great box sets that everyone watches today are so brilliant and immersive is because they have multiple stories going on at the same time in real time. And in a novel or indeed in a TV production, you can cut between the two and get that experience. And we wanted to find a way of that kind of idea that life is unfolding in parallel in different situations, and you can make a choice which storyline you identify with and you hang out and spend your time with. That choice is there in the novel. Who do we sympathise with? Who's really the villain and the hero? These are questions that the narrator of Middlemarch is always pushing back on the reader. And I think that's a real ethical question, that it's a novel without clear-cut heroes and villains. And we wanted our audience to feel part of that decision-making process. And the only way we could kind of give that audience experience was by having these different locations that you could move between over time. To me, that kind of ethical experience that Eliot gives her readers was something that was really unfolded beautifully in Josephine's incredible ability to think in a multi-plotted way.
We realised that we needed 5 scenes. We had the living room and the bank and the pub and the charity bazaar and the newspaper office.
And at that time we still were thinking of it as something set in period, and so that the language was particularly important in thinking of that way of helping actors into that world building as well of what was going on. But it was really interesting that there are moments in Eliot's dialogue that cut across time and space, and when it's the most stripped back, confrontational scenes of a marriage falling apart, the dialogue is as searing now, I think, as it was in the 19th century.
You've spoken of my secret meddling, my interfering ignorance and my false assent.
Look,
I have never expressed myself to you in that way before, and I think you ought to apologise.
you made your fortune out of that profitable business, which had such a blessing on it. And now taken to being a knob, dying land. Still godly, still hot on the prayers.
What I try to do in all of our work is to create an environment where the audience are part of the action. If we're going to move beyond the fourth wall and open up the space to audiences, our audiences are going to be seen, they're going to be given a cup of tea, they're going to be taking out money from the bank, opening a bank account, they'll be being journalists, reporting on various activities that are going on in the town. The point was the audience were trying to solve the mystery of the murder, who murdered Raffles, and they were picking up clues. So they might pick up their clues in the pub, from the gossip and might be literally going off as a journalist, making notes and then reporting it back to Will Ladislav, the editor. So there was an opportunity for the audience to really make their own journey through Middlemarch. There wasn't a sense that they had to leave. They could sit and drink in the pub the whole time and listen to the gossip from the landlady, Mrs. Dollop, or they could make their own way across. They could spend the entire time following Rosamond and her love affair.
Already we were questioning quite when we'd set it. Was it important that this was a historical occurrence, or was actually what we wanted to say that this was now, this was still now? If we set it in the 1980s, there's something hugely important about the history of Coventry in that period. The great technological businesses there were going to decline around car building. That's also part of the story of Middlemarch, where the ribbon weaving trade is collapsing because of historical circumstances in the city then. So once we got to that point, I thought, okay, there's a kind of mirroring of the social transitions between when Eliot set it and Eliot wrote it, and between when, you know, if we set it in the 1980s, that moment now, and when our audience and the present of 2021.
And of course, 1980s was joyous, like joyously colourful, wonderful costumes.
The fashion,
terrible costumes, terrible design. And our wonderful design team had an amazing time sourcing material. So we knew we were creating the world of Middlemarch with 8 professional actors and an audience who would also become part of Middlemarch too. They'd all take on roles of newspaper journalists or guests or friends or medical students. But there was a very key other element, which was our community participants, our middle people, who were somewhere between the audience and the professional actors.
I call upon Mr. Bulstrode to deny these allegations, or else to resign from all positions.
What was so wonderful with having the middle people who were part of our world was that the more they owned that story, the more passionately they hated Bulstrode, the more passionately they were glad to be rid of him, the more the audience were kind of taken on that journey with them. So as we went through that run of shows, by that final show, it was extraordinary, really, to feel that kind of visceral hatred of Bulstrode that was coming from, led by our middle people and Mrs. Dollop, but really, really sort of feeling the audience kind of getting into it. They were so passionate, they were so committed, they were jeering, they were shouting. Working with Ruth brought into focus the possibilities of how rich it can be to work in collaboration with others, and what you brought to me, your world, your insights from such different worlds, your rigour, the way you approach the text and your understanding. I know it enriched the whole process and enriched my understanding of the text and the way that I was able to convey that to our actors and to our participants and therefore to our audiences.
I thought it was incredible. I've never witnessed something quite like it. It was so immersive, the characters were so dynamic, and there was just a whole lot going on, and like all these different buildings, and you'd think it would be hard to keep up with, but it was so smooth, it was with ease, just watching these amazing performers on stage. It's actually one of like the greatest theatre experiences I've ever witnessed.